Senator Golden Campbell, Member Guy, and Senator Allen apologize for being late. However, Senator Allen is in the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Welcome. First of all, in terms of any other, by the way, no other apologies? No?
No, Chairman.
Okay. All right, so let me begin by welcoming all of you to this meeting and to just place on record my appreciation to you for your cooperation and understanding my absence at the last meeting. I was actually out in the field. I know it was a little difficult to get through, and I know you would have been inconvenienced for waiting a little bit. So I apologize for that, and thank you for your understanding and cooperation. And then also would like to recognize my colleague, Member of Parliament for West Central St. James and Attorney General, MP Marlene Malou Fort, for taking on the responsibility of chairing the meeting. I want to just place on record my appreciation to her. Thank you very much for that. I've looked at the minutes and I can see it was an exciting or interesting discussion, and it certainly augurs well for the final document, which ultimately will become part of the legislation around this particular subject here. So thank you very much for that. I want to also just welcome the two presenters or present entities to present. Corporate Accountability will present on the bill, the proposed piece of legislation. And also we have Peer One. So I want to just welcome them. I believe they're in the room, and we will deal with their presentation and discussion momentarily. So that's really the welcome and remarks for now, given the time, we're late. So I want to just move right now in item number 5, which is to read and confirm the minutes of October 14th, 2021. So we're going to move right into it. So page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Pages 4. Five. Six.
Morning, Minister. Apologies for being late.
Hi, Member Golden Campbell. Sure. Thank you for being here. We're going through the minutes. Pages 6. Page 7. Pages 8. Nine. Ten. 11. 12 o'clock. And then 13 and pages 14. Can I have someone move for the confirmation of the minutes?
I so move.
Thank you very much, Senator. And seconded. Anyone for seconded?
Seconded, Minister.
Okay, fine. So Senator Longmore and Senator Allen second. Matters arising from the minutes. It seems that there was a lot of discussion. Well, it's obvious there was an interesting discussion. No matter arising. Okay. If there are no matters arising, then that's good. There are some domestic or in-house matters that I'm being briefed on right now, and I probably should have raised it earlier. I'm going to ask members to allow me, please, before we get into the presentations. The Jamaica Coalition for Tobacco Control, Healthy Caribbean Coalition, and the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association were scheduled to appear today, but are not able to, and are requesting a new date to appear before the committee. Should we just schedule them, and then we ask the Parliament to look at the dates to see how we can schedule and then further inform, or should we explore dates now?
Chairman, I suggest we explore dates from now, because the calendar will get very busy. Changes can always be made later on if the need arises.
Right. How many more meetings are we likely to have? We will have before the break. I think we have about 5 weeks to the first week in December. I think we probably could go up to the first or second week in December, right? Is that possible? Is it possible to go up to the second week in December? I'm asking our parliamentary administrator whether or not that's possible. Ms. Brandon.
Well, Chairman, we'll have 6 outstanding presentations to receive, so we can look at those over 2 meetings.
All right. What do we have scheduled for the next meeting? I'm trying to see if we can accommodate these two before, if not the next one, then the one after.
So the Aston Center for Health and Society, the Association of General Practitioners of Jamaica, and the Jamaica Psychological Society was scheduled to present on the 21st of October. However, that meeting was postponed. So we need a date for those 3 entities to appear before the committee. And then following that, the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce and Mr. Wayne Booth, along with the Jamaica Coalition for Tobacco Control, will need a meeting date to present to the committee.
All right, so we have some dates here that are being proposed, and I put this for consideration by members. Wednesday, November 10th, Thursday, November, this is between at 10 a.m. Normally we try to keep these meetings within 2 hours. Thursday, November 11th at 2 p.m. and Tuesday, November 23rd at 10 a.m. Chairman,
before you go, I I was advised that PAC will start meeting on the 23rd.
So that date is out then.
So that date is out.
Okay. So we have a Wednesday or Thursday, the 10th or the 11th for the next meeting. I'm just trying to line this up in order to accommodate, which would be the three that you have mentioned: the Ashton Center for Health, general practitioners, and the Psychological Society, right?
Yes, Chairman.
All right, so the others that were not able to, and I've mentioned JHTA and JCTC, HCC, we would schedule them for after that meeting.
Yes, Chairman.
And that would have taken care of all the presenters, or
the Jamaica Chambers of Commerce and Mr. Wayne both. We need a date for those two to present, Chairman.
All right. So what we'll do then, we try to have 3 meetings between now and the end of the session this year, this calendar year. Is that? Let's try and see if we can get some dates, and then at the end we'll decide on whether we go the 10th or the 11th at the end of the meeting. Okay.
Okay, Chairman.
All right, so can we then go straight into now the presentation? We have corporate accountability. Will make the first presentation as agreed, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, the lead on this, and then can share screen with their presentation. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Daniel Dorado, Director of Policy, Organizing and Tobacco Control Campaign with Corporate Accountability. Here are also my colleagues, Mr. Jaime Arcila and Mr. TJ Faircolt, who will be assisting me sharing our slides. So please, TJ, if you please can share your screen so that we can start with our presentation. Thank you very much. Good morning, Honorable Chairman and distinguished members of the Joint Selected Committee. My name is Daniel Dorado, again, Director of Policy Organizing and Tobacco Control Campaign. And on behalf of Corporate Accountability, we would like to start by expressing our gratitude for the invitation to attend today's appearance to present our organization's submission to the Tobacco Control Act 2020 that is being discussing, and by congratulating the Honorable Parliament of Jamaica for its commitment to strengthen its obligations derived from the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Next slide, please. Well, before jumping in the overview of these topics that I briefly want and respectfully present to all of you, I want to start by declaring that either I or the organization to which I belong receives any kind of contribution or financial assistance of any kind from the tobacco industry, either directly or indirectly, and I affirm that I do not have affiliation with this industry. Saying this, with the time that have been allocated to share today, I want to specifically address these 3 main topics that I want to respectfully share with all of you. First of all, to mention who we are and why we are here today. Secondly, address 3 main observations and recommendations around the need to uphold Article 5.3 of the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control and its guidelines. Some observations and recommendations around strengthening the provisions around strengthening smoke-free environments. And finally, some recommendations around the provisions around tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, finalizing with some closing remarks. Next slide, please. So, who we are and why we are here today. Corporate Accountability is a US-based non-governmental organization that operates globally. Our mission is to prevent transnational corporations from devastating democracy, violating human rights, and destroying our planet. We are committed to helping build a world rooted in justice, where corporations answer to people, not the other way around. A world where every person has access to clean water, healthy food, a safe planet to live, and the opportunity to reach their full human potential. That is why, for more than 25 years, Corporate Accountability Tobacco Control Campaign have been supporting the ratification and implementation of the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, providing our expertise and challenging the expansion of tobacco corporations that take the lives of millions of people every year. When we consider the impacts of tobacco use, we must consider the fact that despite killing 2,000 Jamaicans every year, tobacco use is still prevalent amongst more than 275,000 Jamaicans. The cost of tobacco use goes far beyond health. Tobacco consumption and production is a cross-cutting negative impact on healthcare systems, on children development, on the environment from pollution to soil degradation, with non-communicable diseases and equity as a low-income woman, children bear the brunt of the harms, and even economically beyond healthcare systems. What are the cost deaths to Jamaica's people and the country more broadly, and how do we ensure that the potential loss is accounted for in the conversation around tobacco harm in Jamaica? There is a clear need to constantly update national regulations that can also go beyond the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Next slide, please. So in order to jump into the observations and recommendations, very respectfully, we want to start by addressing the content of Article 2.1 of the convention itself as an umbrella for all the recommendations that we kindly want to address to all of you. As you all are aware, Jamaica ratified this international treaty on July 7, 2005. And as a member of this international treaty, there should be a huge call in order so that parties can recall that they should go beyond the provisions that the treaty itself contains. And some of these aspects are currently addressed on the content of the Tobacco Control Act itself. So here is one of the main messages that we want to leave to very respectfully to all of you. The Honorable Parliament should not be afraid of going beyond the international provisions. This is part of the international commitments that Jamaica as a sovereign state has assumed. And in order to keep advancing the recommendations and the provisions that the treaty and the other instruments that have been developed in order to secure its implementation, it will definitely translate into the effective implementation of the right to health, and also to keep saving Jamaican people's life. Next slide, please. So how we can translate the content of Article 2.1 of the Global Tobacco Treaty into the act that is being discussing. And again, we respectfully want to focus on three main recommendations. And here is the first one: the need to uphold Article 5.3 and its guidelines. Probably you have been hearing about this in the previous presentations that other tobacco control civil society organizations have previously presented. But we just want to emphasize and echo that the provisions that are particularly expressed on the Tobacco Control Act, and I will go to them in a moment, should also be addressing and taking into the implementation what it is currently on the international treaty, since this is our international obligations, again, and in the spirit of Jamaica observing what they have in a sovereignty way accepted to implement on your national legislation, the parliament will just be extrapolating what is in the international sphere to the national arena to protect Jamaica population. So what I want to address of this slide is a guiding principle of another instrument that supports the implementation of the Global Tobacco Treaty, the guidelines for implementation of Article 5.3. One of its principles addresses that there is a fundamental and irreconcilable conflict between the tobacco industry interest and public health policy interest. So with this in mind, there is a clear need that as much as possible, and in the spirit with Article 2.1 of the treaty, and of course with Article 5.3 on the treaty, that the provisions that are included in tobacco control national legislations could secure that they are protected from tobacco industry interference. And considering this, and if we please can move to the next slide, here are some language suggestions that for sure you have been able to observe in the submission that we sent early March, but clarifying that very respectfully what we are addressing here are some language suggestions that seeks to strengthen what it is currently addressed, and we definitely applaud the current content of protecting the Tobacco Control Act from the tobacco industry interference. So in part one, paragraph 3A, which stands the object of the act, well, you will see here, and I will not go reading in detail, probably later if you want that we express more broadly why we are addressing this, but the intention is that from the beginning of the act, which, and particularly from the object, there could be a strong reference to what was mentioned in the guiding principle of Article 5.3 guidelines for implementation, protecting the bill itself from the tobacco industry interference with tobacco control policies. Next slide, please. The second language suggestion that we respectfully have is in part 3 with section 7, paragraph 1. And I will go more in detail on when I finalize presenting the language suggestions, why we are addressing this. But particularly here, we are also trying to address an additional recommendation from the guidelines that apply to a public and any public body that will be in some way targeted by or intend to be approached by the tobacco industry interference. And next slide, please. And finally, in the same section, part 3, paragraph 10, we are also kindly want to present this language suggestion in the spirit of what was adopted in the 8th Conference of the Parties around maximizing transparency decisions. Jamaica has been a champion government on adopting and promoting securing the implementation of Article 5.3 on the national level. Also, Jamaica's participation during the 8th Conference of the Parties secured that this decision was adopted. And it is very strategic to see how these decisions that are adopted again in the international arena could be translated, and seeing the spirit that particularly this part 3 opens, we definitely want to encourage the distinguished joint selected committee to take into consideration this language suggestion. So finalizing, addressing some of the language suggestions that we respectfully have around this section, let's transition, and please, if we can go to the next slide. Why we are addressing these recommendations, particularly around the need to uphold Article 5.3. And you will see in this slide a couple of international instruments. And here I want also to disclose that I will be addressing to this instrument also in my hat of being a lawyer. So saying this, when we talk about the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control and the additional instruments, but particularly the guidelines for implementation, we should be taking into considerations that these are international addresses, basically that all parties that sovereignty has addressed to and international instruments and the instruments that secure their implementation should observe and as much as possible considering their national legislation and their constitutions the way to adopt it in the spirit that those treaties were adopted. So saying this, the language suggestions that again are inspired in the international instruments that are adopted, we very respectfully want to address that sometimes tobacco industry tend to address that these instruments are voluntary, that are all optional. And in the spirit of the Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties, there is no way in talking in legal terms to address that these guidelines are optional. I just want to reiterate, these guidelines are complementary and need to be adopted again in that sovereignty matter by the parliaments or the Congress in the way that they consider most appropriate. There has been consensus around all these instruments, and that is why there is the expectations that parties to the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, again, as much as possible, and considering their national legislation, try to implement this. And that is why basically we highly want to address that part 3 of the section of the Tobacco Control Act could be also, if there is the possibility, to consider these language suggestions in order to strengthen them. But in addition, and just to focus a little bit on some of the contents on these guidelines, and so that you all distinguished members can see why we are addressing this, are the recommendations that are based on these Article 5.3 guidelines, particularly recommendations 1, 4.9, and 8.3, that basically address in a spirit that, well, that parties should raise awareness of the harm of the tobacco products, but also that they need to keep protecting their national their national provisions to all powers of the government in order to have really clear rules on how to address or how to block the approach from tobacco industry in terms of trying to affect the development of the tobacco control laws. And finally, we are also mentioning two decisions that were adopted on the 8th Conference of the Parties, that again, when parties every 2 years meet to discuss how the treaty has evolved, these particular two decisions reaffirm the compromise of the parties around adopting and keep implementing provisions that secure the implementations around Article 5.3, their guidelines, and definitely shaping legislations that could avoid the tobacco industry interference. So with this, I hope I have been addressed the first observation that we want to address to you. If we please can move to the next slide, and I am almost finishing. We have also some reflections and comments around the provisions that are on Part 5 of the Tobacco Control Act that are related to tobacco smoke-free environments. Definitely, and this year was published on the World Health Organization report on the global tobacco control epidemic, that these type of policies that are in line with Article 8 of the Global Tobacco Treaty are effective in terms of decrease the consumption of tobacco products, and also to protect the youth that, as you all know, are one of the main audiences that tobacco industry are always targeting in terms of approaching them to the consumption of the products. So what we want to address around this point is that we celebrate the inclusion of this part, and we highly recommend that this part could stay as it is, in terms that particularly these do not only observe the provisions of Article 8, its guidelines, it also observes other additional instruments that has been developing during the 7th Conference of the Parties and 8th Conference of the Parties. And without going into too much details, but you will see the images on the slide, there is a report that was presented by WHO organization during the 7th Conference of the Parties, and this decision that was adopted around novel and emerging tobacco products during the 8th Conference of the Parties, that basically address that tobacco control policies should also evolve and adapt in a way to address how the tobacco industry is constantly evolving. You know that there are novel and emerging tobacco products, particularly the electronic nicotine delivery systems, the tobacco heat-not-burn products, that addresses a challenge in terms that the policies that and the provisions that are addressed in the Global Tobacco Treaty need to respond to that, and effectively tobacco smoke-free environments is one of those provisions that have also demonstrated, and the report on the global tobacco epidemic that was recently launched by the World Health Organization addresses the need of keep advancing tobacco smoke-free environments and the benefits about this. So one more time, celebrate how this section is being structured, and we definitely encourage that the content of the section could stay as it is, and also, and if it could be more inclusive to other areas to protect from the consumption of these products, definitely it will reflect on the right to health implementation. And the final observation that we have, and if we please can move to the next slide, is about Part 7, particularly section 24, that refers to the provisions around advertising, promotion, and sponsorship. In the same spirit as we address the ones around smoke-free environments, the provisions that the Global Tobacco Treaty and its guidelines for implementations for these provisions in particular are the ones related to Article 13. Basically address really positive impacts when we are talking about regulating, and if we can go to a next level, banning or adopting banning provisions that could secure that the advertising, promotion, and sponsorship could be really, really well regulated. One more time, the World Health Organization this year report 2021 on the global tobacco epidemic addresses the benefits of countries advancing on these regulations. Definitely, how it is currently addressed on the bill, we see that it reflects the spirit of Article 13 of the Global Tobacco Treaty, its guidelines, and of course, the other international instruments that has been attained in order to secure these provisions could be effectively implemented on the national legislation. So with this, and if we can move to the next slide, on behalf of corporate accountability, we want to thank the opportunity to be able to present. Definitely these three major recommendations that we have highlighted, again, the need to uphold Article 5.3 in the spirit of what it is currently in the treaty and Article 5.3 guidelines, the need of strengthening and keep the current provisions around advertising, promotion, and sponsorship and smoke-free environments as they are on the current bill. Definitely they reflect the commitment and the spirit, not only about the tobacco treaty, also of the Honorable Parliament of Jamaica in order to keep advancing and adopting vanguard legislations on tobacco control. We want to conclude by saying, and we are bringing this quote of a former General Director of the World Health Organization, Dr. Margaret Chan, which basically address that big tobacco can afford to hire the best lawyers and public relation firms that money can buy. Big money can trample even the most damaging scientific evidence. It is horrific to think that an industry known for its dirty tricks and dirty laundry could be allowed to trump what it is clearly in the public's best interest. You, distinguished members of the Joint Selected Committee, have a huge responsibility of keep implementing the right to health. The current bill addresses this compromise, and we just want to encourage all of you to keep moving in this spirit, in the spirit of the Article 5.2.1 of the Global Tobacco Treaty, and secure that this legislation could translate into the right implementation of the right to health for the protections of all Jamaicans. Thank you very much. And I keep attentive to clarify any point or to address any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel Dorado of Corporate Accountability. Thank you for that informative presentation, looking at some of the sort of international treaties and I would say best practices around how to treat with tobacco in terms of the response to the ill effects of tobacco consumption. All right, so the floor is open. Members, please give them the technology platform, raise your hand using the platform, and then I will ask you to comment in the order in which the hands are raised. Could you shift over a little more seconds? Anyone? Okay, I see Senator Shireen Golden Campbell. I'll yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Dorado and your team for the presentation. Chairman, I'm just going to start off with the latter part of Mr. Dorado's presentation, dealing with the issue of advertising, promotion and sponsorship reflected at clause 24 of our bill, and the corresponding provisions in the WHO framework convention on tobacco control would be Article 13 as he identified. And Mr. Dorado, if I could ask you, not that you would have been the drafter or participant in the particular treaty, but the Article 13 speaks in particular to a ban, parties banning cross-border advertising, promotion, and sponsorship originating from its territory. At paragraph 3 of that same article, that language is repeated. A comprehensive ban on advertising, promotion, and sponsorship originating from its territory with cross-border effects. Do you have any insight as to what that means? What is cross-border effects? Because the ban is linked to minimizing or eliminating that. What do we mean by cross-border effects?
Many thanks for the question, and I will try to address in a concrete way. So definitely Article 13 offers a variety of ways on how to cover several advertising, promotion, and sponsorship ways that the tobacco industry use in terms to, again, advertise, promote, and sponsorship their products. So when we are talking about cross-border, for instance, and let me bring an example, is, for instance, the use of social networks, no? So for instance, the tobacco industry could be using promotion and sponsorship in a country that is outside of Jamaica, but Jamaicans, of course, could have access to that content used by their social networks or access into internet or through other technological channels. This is just an example, no? So in terms of how this strategy is using, and it is well documented by recognized authorities that that the tobacco industry use these methods also to take advantage of the lack of regulations about the aspect in the countries. Even though the guidelines around this particular issue are still pending on regulation in the Conference of the Parties, it is a fact that the Article 13 opens the door so that countries could go, state parties could go beyond and start regulating this tactic that, again, the tobacco industry is taking advantage. So definitely there are some countries that has been trying to take a step on this aspect. I think that also it depends definitely on parties, and of course taking into account their national legislation and of course these constitutional regulations in order to adequate these regulations to effectively address this tactic that, again, is one of the tactics that the tobacco industry are using the most to promote, advertise their products. I hope this address in some way some of the responses you were looking for, but also happy to provide additional context as needed. Thank you again for the question.
And thank you for your response. It does address some of my concern. I am a little bit focused on the fact that the agreement between state parties really pulled out this question of cross-border effects, and I accept your response as a legitimate concern we should have. What do I say though to those persons who have said to me, and this often is the young people demographic, that look, tobacco companies have supported educational initiatives in that group, and if we were to place a ban and restriction on them, they would not be able to do so, and a number of young people would then be disenfranchised. That I am grappling with that. I'm moved by their concern, not quite persuaded, but I am moved. And I'm saying that also in the context of our clause 24 here really goes at the restrictions and the ban on advertising, promotion, and sponsorship in our territory. And I know that the article is inclusive, but it is particularly emphasizing the cross-border effects. All of that in the context now of a developing country where our circumstances and the circumstances of our people are not the same as they are in developed countries. What is my response to be? Why is it that Article 24, I'm sorry, Clause 24 in your estimation should go as far as refusing sponsorship initiatives by tobacco companies in Jamaica?
Go ahead, Mr. Dorado.
Many thanks for your reactions, and definitely I want to start by taking your final words. Of course, the implementation of the, again, global tobacco treaty provisions depends on the particular circumstances of each state party, and definitely, well, the consideration of low-income countries is something that is worth to take into consideration. But let me again bring the World Health Organization report 2021 on global tobacco epidemic. If I can share the link of that in the chat box, I will encourage you all, honorable members of the Joint Committee, if you are not yet familiar with this report, to kindly take a look. And if we open this report and we go particularly to the section that addresses enforces bans on tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, that is page 80 of the report itself, it has a lot of estimates, particularly on how all these provisions around advertising, promotion, and sponsorship has taken a huge impact in countries, on low-income countries. Now, you will see that there is a map that addresses how every country has started adapting. But definitely it reflects in particularly how these provisions help to protect the population against tobacco industry, reduce the tobacco use, and of course, it helps to address the current challenges that we are discussing around, well, cross-border, but of course, there are other challenges. For instance, you may have seen how the tobacco industry, and not only, and I think this is not only the case for Jamaica, also for other countries, how they are using corporate social responsibility strategies to promote to promote their products on one way, saying that they are in some way legitimately try to support countries, but in other way, they are keep promoting their products. So definitely, and I am bringing this example, and I'm really glad you bring the cross-border example, because I think that definitely the way, and our suggestion definitely, as a civil society organization, we are not the ones in order to say, this is the perfect recipe that each party should address. It will depend on your particular legislation. But the message that we want to say is that the tobacco industry is very creative on the ways they advertise, they promote, and of course, sponsorship. So it basically requires that what it is currently established on Article 13, its guidelines could be addressed, of course, taking the particular considerations in order to, as much as possible, go to the level that the country could address on that provisions. We want to address that how it is currently on the Tobacco Control Act addresses and also goes beyond provisions that including developing countries have developing, but that, well, with the adoption of this, definitely Jamaica will be also inspiring other low-income countries to move in this path.
And I don't have, Member Golding, you at another point, I wanted to just comment briefly on
No, Chairman, please do. I think I'm finished with that particular point, and I'll yield for somebody else at this time.
Okay. But firstly, I think it's an interesting observation, and it's important to clarify, because there is a temptation, I think, in societies where there is never enough resources to address some of the basic needs of that particular community or society to be attracted to offers of support of one form or another, whether, from one entity or another, and in this instance, the tobacco industry. The challenge is to how do you address the genuine need for that support while still placing in context the fundamental issues around development around that community or society, and juxtapose the pros and the cons of that particular support that is on offer. I think the point is worth noting that the tobacco companies apply significant resources, psychological assessment around how they communicate their message. That messaging is not normally as obvious to the sort of regular onlooker who may have a need, in the case of communities that may have that need, or countries for that matter, but nevertheless sends very strong signals around the relationship between the support that is being given and the support for the product. I can speak to that as someone who has as my core discipline, marketing and communication. I teach it at the university for many years. And indeed, sometimes, of course, I practice it in my own professional life, because communicating is very important. The challenge is how, when you dissect that and determine the longer term effects of not the support, which may be a good thing, but the impact on support for the consumption of the brand, which ultimately has its own side effects, you realize that you are receiving little and gaining and gaining at the same time a lot of negatives in terms of the public health impact, specifically addressing this particular scenario. And so I think in the case of tobacco, there is strong evidence, scientific evidence clearly to show the ill effects of tobacco. There is no good that can come from smoking. I think that is already established clinically. Do you want to, even in the interest of development, risk getting support in a situation where you feel deprived, but ultimately paying for that over time in a much more substantive way, not just in terms of public health cost, but also personal impact, personal losses, and so on, productivity loss from illness and all that. So I think that's where I think governments and leaders have to provide a more in-depth analysis to manage those relationships. And, you know, of course, the same could be said for other areas of society and other products, which sometimes is not always seen as, you know, having the longer term ill effects. What is focused on is the immediate gain. And I think leadership is important in this regard, and it's not always obvious, but we have to do the analysis. And I think this is what a joint select committee and having experts comment on this are intended to do. But I think it's an important point. I am happy the member raised it. I see Member Gale with his hand up. I don't know if Member Golden Campbell had completed her points. You say you wanted to raise another point, or should I go to Member Gale?
No, Chairman, I'm yielding.
Okay, Member Gale.
Thank you, my sister Shireen. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Dorado, I want to drag your attention to our proposed bill in terms of Part 8, reports and information, with specific reference on the request or demand for every manufacturer, importer, or exporter to provide certain relevant information to the minister or to the state on a defined time frame. And it outlines the respective areas. But I want to drag your attention particularly to 1D that speaks to constituents, additives, and of toxic constituents, as well as emissions in their individual concentration and their ratio to nicotine. Now, one entity that represented before this committee raised that concern as it relates to their ingredients. And this was in relation to providing such information that would be viewed as trade secrets. Now, what I want to ask you, if whether or not this is a common practice in making this demand as part of the legislations, or one of the standards in relation to if it's aligned to the convention. And if so, what would a state do with that information? And how can the manufacturer or exporter be assured that such information, once submitted, is protected? That would be my question to you.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you for that question, honorable member. Well, I will want to say that definitely we are approaching to the analysis of the Tobacco Control Act in the areas of our expertise and definitely in the spirit of the Global Tobacco Treaty. So I will present apologize if I cannot go since several of that aspects go beyond my expertise, but I will be happy to provide a couple of insights to your questions, again, in the spirit of what the Global Tobacco Treaty addresses. It is definitely one of the points that the treaty address, that the industry, the tobacco control industry, has the obligation to submit to the competent authority of each state party the information about its products and other of their practices. And definitely the argument that you bring in terms that the industry, in terms of avoiding implementing that that mandate from the treaty itself, address the argument of intellectual property information, secret information, and that they are not able to share it. So all this to say that parties have again, in correspondence with their national legislation and the Constitution, should need to approach in which their legal norms allow them to address. So that will be my initial approach to this content, because it is really contentious, is that definitely there is a need of the committee to address and really be very careful on seeing if what it is currently addressed in the Act addresses the spirit of the global treaty itself. And I will keep it there for the moment.
Maybe what you could tell us at a later date, if possible, if all possible, is how other states would have treated this particular aspect of a request or demand.
Well, for the purpose of this audience, I will apologize, but definitely if I can send a written submission, I definitely will be more than happy to share some examples on how the region and other countries from other regions are addressing these issues, particularly the practices that are documented by the World Health Organization, so that you can take into consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Dorado. That would be very helpful.
Thank you very much, Member Gale. Any other comments or questions? I'd like to ask a final question, if Mr. Dorado would permit me. The conventions that you have identified that we, to guide the discussion around the bill, how much of this is adopted in a sort of wholesale way without much tweaking on a global basis? And to what extent does national economics, rich versus poor, small versus large countries, adjust in some of these policies, if you will, in terms of their own legislation? Do you find fairly consistent uniformity of adoption, or are there major adjustments?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question. If you don't mind, before jumping into your question, I just want to address one more point to the previous question that was addressed by Member Gale. And another recommendation that we will have is that the Framework Convention Control Secretariat offers international cooperation, and of course, is the entity in charge of providing the technical assistance that parties may recall in order to, to the information that they may need about a particular provision. So I just also want to bring this point in terms that if the Honorable Committee has particular questions, not only about the question that you mentioned, also the question that was addressed about advertising, promotion, and sponsorship. Definitely, this Framework Convention Secretariat is a really good resource in addition to the Pan American Health Organization in order to keep having the technical assistance to secure the most integral adoption of the Tobacco Control Act itself. And with that, I will jump into answer your question, Honorable Chairman. So yes, definitely when we try to address the implementation of the treaty question, this is a really tricky question because, of course, and you all have pointed really well, the implementation of the treaty and the treaty recognizes itself. Basically, its implementation depends on the conditions that every country has in terms of advancing. But let me give an example of a high developing country, for instance, such as Australia, and other countries in the region that are not in that category, but for instance, are leading countries in the implementation of the tobacco control provisions. For instance, Panama and Uruguay and Brazil. These three countries have really, of course, considering the challenges that they have been key role models, for instance, in the need of upholding Article 5.3 provisions. Also, Panama is one of the few countries in the region, despite its considerations to adopt the total ban on the point of sale for the tobacco products. Of course, countries such as Colombia also have adopted this provision in terms of prohibiting the promotion of the products at the point of sale. So definitely, I am providing this example to try to make a point. As always, the implementation of the tobacco control provisions depends on the political will. And the political will definitely, as much as possible, and as it focuses its intention on the spirit of the Global Tobacco Treaty, of course, taking into account the provisions around conflict of interest and what the tobacco industry constantly try to address. Definitely, if these points are taken into consideration, every country should be able to adapt and evolve. Again, the report that I share with all of you on the chat box gives several examples on how low-income countries has made a huge evolution in terms of the empower measures, but here we are talking about advertising, promotion, and sponsorship and smoke-free environments. But in that report, there are really concrete examples, for instance, on how some of these countries have also prohibited the point of sale ads, and other examples regarding regulating corporate social responsibility and other ways that are being adopted so that the industry keep promoting this addictive and harmful product. So with that, I hope it provides some examples of good practices, Mr. Chairman, and also happy to keep providing examples as needed.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I think we'll close on this aspect of the session. Thank you, Mr. Daniel Dorado, for your presentation from Corporate Accountability, and your information, of course, will be circulated to members, and hopefully, what I'm sure will help us in our deliberations. So I want to thank you and your team for the efforts and for the clarity of thought, and we wish you best in your continued lobbying and support globally for best practices around tobacco control. Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to move now to the next presenter, and the next presenter is Pier 1. I believe I see Mr. Jason Russell representing Pier 1 online. I'm not sure if there are anybody else, but he will recognize if there are. Well, Mr. Jason Russell, I'm going to hand the floor over to you now for your presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Joint Committee. No, it's just me alone, a humble businessman from Montego Bay in the tourist industry. Owner and operator of the Pier 1 restaurant, bar and nightclub, where we cater to a lot of tourists that come to the island for a good experience. And that's the angle at which I am taking this presentation. It's mainly dealing with the expectations of tourists coming to our island. I am I am going to be brief and to the point. Our mission at Pier 1 is to offer a local experience at international standards. And what is that experience? It's a Jamaican island vibe that promotes a warm, carefree, hospitable atmosphere. And of course, as our tagline claims, the no problem man experience. And what does that mean? You should come to Jamaica and experience no problem. We sell that globally, we sell it all over the world to different entities, different sales agents. Come to Jamaica and experience a good, fulfilled vibe that is welcoming and engaging. But it's not easy. No one person can guarantee that. It takes the partnership of government, small experiential businesses like myself, and large businesses, significantly or especially like a Red Stripe, Ray Neville, Carreras, people that can help to sustain the entertainment business that the tourists are coming for. Guests come, and I'll speak specifically about Pier 1. Guests come to Pier 1 and they're expecting alcohol, good food, good music, and of course the ability, if you're a smoker, to smoke. It is in a lot of places in the world accepted that if you have a designated smoking area, that you can enjoy your preference of smoke. It is, in my opinion, that eliminating that not only eliminate the sale of the cigarette, which is really not that important to me and my bottom line, but you might eliminate a whole group. Clause 19 that we're looking at specifically prohibits the sale of cigarettes in a public space. That public space, as I understand it, would include a Pier 1. I have recently, after the last round of restrictions where smoking was not allowed indoors, I built a 2,000 square foot deck adjacent to my regular dining room that was designated for smokers. It's uncovered, open, fully open air, and it was designed to allow, and again, mainly tourists coming in to be able to enjoy themselves in a safe atmosphere. What that did for me, it allowed large groups to come, large groups that had smokers in them to come and utilize the space. What we found is whenever you eliminate smoking, which was what happened when we had the indoor smoking ban, groups started to go to unsavory places. They would come to the door, told that they cannot smoke, and one or two people in the group would say, look, that's BS, they're not coming inside. And where do they find themselves? Which we all know, illegal corner shops, corner bars, parties. We found the same thing happening with, for instance, the curfews, where we have to close at a certain time. The tourists are on the road, they need places to go, and they find themselves in all kind of holes, all kind of problems. We had a recent issue where we brought down some guests on a shuttle from the hotel. We had to close at a certain time, which of course we do follow the protocols, and the guests left and found themselves in a very bad situation, and the hotel was very upset with us. They take their guests very serious, and coming to Pier 1 is a chosen spot for that particular hotel. And for them to leave to go to Pier 1 and end up, they were actually robbed, and went back to the hotel complaining. One of the main reasons that we find in the business is that regulations come to establish businesses, namely Pier 1, the Margaritavilles, the Hard Rocks. They come there first. They sit there for a very long time. We get all the health codes that come in, all the safety codes that come in. We're the first persons to get them, we're the first person to initiate them, and then we're held to a very high standard. What that does is that you see illegal operations propping up all over. You see it on the Negril Beach with the horseback riding, where there's strict restrictions on how you can operate, insurances, stuff like that. But yet the country is unable to regulate in a lot of areas, people, illegal businesses, just to call it what it is, illegal businesses from propping up and taking advantage of these regulations. So we find that it's a little bit harsh to, of course, to penalize proper business, proper established business, taxpayers, when they are doing what is necessary, creating smoke-safe environment for tourists. Again, I'm speaking about mainly tourists. We also find that Clause 24, Section 1, the ban on the displaying of cigarettes is a difficult way to sell, and I think it's going to lead itself to what we would consider bad service. We don't sell anything under the bar counter. We don't take anything from a cupboard as if it's an illegal, it's either legal or it's illegal. Cigarettes are legal, and in order for people to have access to them, they have to know that they exist. They have to know that we have them for sale. They have to know the price. They have to know the labeling. So it's unrealistic as far as I'm concerned to sell cigarettes under a counter, to remove all form of branding from a menu or a display that would display, because tourists are coming in. They don't know what these brands are. They have no ability to decipher what a menthol, which is my menthol cigarette, which is a regular cigarette, which is a light. So it has to be displayed. The alternative to that would be one of my waitresses going with the packs of cigarettes to a table and showing them individually what the different cigarettes are. I think that's unrealistic. It's not something that our industry would be, prepared to do. I think that would leave itself to a lot of bad service. I don't see where a display with what you're selling being that difficult. It's not necessarily suggestive, it's just more informative. Also, Clause 24, Section 3, that speaks to no partnership. I find that also a little bit heavy-handed. Carreras in Pier 1 has grown our F&B business leaps and bounds. They've sent us to many restaurant and bar shows. In proportionate to the sales that we do. They have supported our brand. A lot of the regulations that come in, they're the first persons to come in. They are the first person to put up signs. They're the first person to make us aware of what's going on. They've also done a lot of training. I think it's unreasonable to ask somebody to sell a brand and not be able to partner. We partner with every brand that we sell. Everything that CPJ, Red Stripe, Ray and Neville, Wisinco, there's all a partnership. You're not just selling somebody's product. There's always support. There's always information. There's always accountability. You have to think about the way the product is being used to make sure you're maximizing the performance of the product. And that does come with support. I think it's difficult to pull that support from any brand, whether it be cigarettes, alcohol, any food product. It's always important. I personally have been to Vegas on more than one occasion, sent by Carreras. It has brought my brand to a level that is international. I don't think I would have been able to do it without a partnership like that. At the time, I would never be able to afford it. And they've done it to many other small locations. And I think that's invaluable. And I think it's a little hypocritical because the tax that comes off of cigarettes does also go to strengthen healthcare and other forms of society. I don't think it's considered to be dirty money or a money that shouldn't be collected. So I think it's fair to say that the money that does come from cigarettes, the support that does come from cigarettes do go to good. And until the day we've totally banned the sale of cigarettes and closed down the cigarette companies, I don't see why we should turn our backs on that support. I also found there's a link to vaping as it was compared to cigarettes, and I think that's apples to oranges. Vaping is 97% less harmful than a cigarette. It is less offensive to others when people are vaping in a group or in an area. I know of more than one person that has use vaping to quit smoking. So I think it shouldn't be paired. We have no problem at Pier 1 with the vaping products. These are just angles I'm taking as a business person in the tourist industry. I'm not speaking on whether it's right or it's wrong. I'm speaking about guest experience and what people are expecting to get once they come into an area that's not necessarily deemed to be holier than thou. They're not going to church. They're going to drink alcohol. They're going to have a good time. A lot of practices that they might partake in by the end of the night would not meet their mother's approval, would not be the best thing for them, but that is the choices they've made, and that's the products that we sell. And I just think it's a little bit heavy-handed now to take cigarettes out of that space when it's being done in a safe, controlled environment. I would also love to ask the definition of the public places. I see it being used, and if it is that all public places will have no smoking, does that mean that there will never be a designated smoking area that the public can access? I think I'm not so clear on how that is being stipulated. To close, I think putting a smoking ban on entertainment, especially entertainment / tourist entities, would be devastating to Jamaica as a brand. I think we have a lot of fam trips. A lot of people are coming down to enjoy our country. And I think restricting that movement, restricting that portion of society from coming to our country might be devastating to tourism. And I think that's something that must be contemplated, must be considered when making certain laws. Yes, we know Jamaicans have to be kept safe. And sometimes it does seem like one counts as the other, and in a lot of circumstances they do. But I am here to argue on behalf of that tourist coming down, trying to have the best time of their life for the 2 weeks that they've gotten their leave and their vacation, and they would just like to come and have some fun. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm open for any questions or any perspective.
Thank you very much, Jason. Clear interest. You're someone I've known for a long time. And I'll also declare interest. I've been to Pier 1 several times. And I say that to say that before I ask members to come in, of course, that I think you short sell yourself, given the amazing product that you have in Pier 1. If you think you, based on what you've said, that you're likely to lose clients because of a no smoking environment, I think Pier 1 represents so much more as an experience that I would probably, one of my first questions would probably in a sort of is to ask you to explain why you think that package called Pier 1, which has been around for so long, would be compromised by not being able to have a smoking area. But I'm going to ask, I just make a couple of comments, but I wanted to ask Mr. Edwards to clarify that clause that speaks to the no smoking and the link to that and the definition of public spaces, because I think the two are linked, and I just wanted Mr. Edwards just to remind us of the interpretation of that as a response to your question to Jason, but also kind of linking both. And then I'll come in after with a couple of comments and then we open the floor. Mr. Edwards?
Yes, Chair. So we are speaking to clause 12. And clause 12 is the one that introduces the whole concept of smoke-free environments and indicates where smoking would be restricted. And we provide in subsection 2 of 12 that notwithstanding the general restriction on smoking in a public place or within a certain radius of a public place, there is specific provision, a carve out for the owners or operators of bars, restaurants, clubs, store and tourist establishments to establish outdoor smoking areas. And then we have, as Mr. Russell had pointed out, the specifications in relation to how these areas should be set up, established. So the other issue is in relation to public place. And it is true that this has caused some concern throughout the industry. We have had in the committee a lot of representation coming from bar and club owners, restaurant owners about this issue. And we had indicated throughout the course of the sittings of this committee that the text of the bill is somewhat misleading because it wasn't meant to be a total ban in relation to public places, and the wording is under review and will be adjusted accordingly, because this is something that has come up at previous meetings. So I just want to indicate to Mr. Russell and others in the industry that.
So go ahead. Sorry, you finish?
Yeah, yes, sure. Yes, sure.
Right. So I asked that for that clarity, Jason, Mr. Russell, and just to reiterate what has been said, that we do take the point that has been raised around the issue of definition of public spaces or places, and that is going to inform any amendments for clarity in the final piece of legislation that will be advanced to Parliament for approval. And also that the whole issue of designated area. It appears to me that in your presentation, you have been quite explicit that in your case, you have in fact, you took the trouble and time to establish an area that could be classified as a designated area. The question is, what are the specifics around what that area is? I know for a fact that the open door, open air, distance between that area and other areas and so on, makes the possibility for that space to be created real. So I would allow that. The point is taken, it has been raised by others, and as our chief drafts person has stated, that is going to, we will try to make that clarity a little more pronounced so that we support that possibility. Beyond that, one has to also determine. I don't think that the justification for that kind of request, even though it's a request that is being considered or looked at, could be that it's primarily tourists that go there. And I say so for a couple of reasons. One, if you're going to lock yourself into just the tourists, the issues now come up about how do you screen to ensure that non-tourists go there or locals, and then you get into another round of discussion about the right to access and so on, which may not be where you want to go, or what a piece of legislation of this kind would want to prescribe on. And so one would have to be careful in terms of how you posture that argument. I think more importantly is the approach that Mr. Edwards has signaled in terms of how you treat with the separation of those who choose to, without it affecting those who choose not to, because of the implications of secondhand smoking and the impact of smoking generally on the population. But I think that clarity, that point is well made, has been made before, and we will attempt to deal with that clarity. The issue about sponsorship and loyalty, or sponsorship and the impact of sponsorship on business development, my words, not yours, but you have benefited, you say, from sponsorship, and you think that others could and should. Again, I raised the point about the the rationale and the longer term impact of that sponsorship. And it's reflected several times in the discussions during the course of these hearings, which is of course to build loyalty and to build loyalty around a brand, and a brand that clearly has significant consequences over time on the public health and by extension, the other aspects of the society, individual, personal, health, and so on. And that's always the sort of principle that we battle with. How do we accommodate? And clearly, it is a product that is legal, but accommodate in a way that does not seek to compromise or impact in a negative way the greater good of the society. Because ultimately we all bear that burden if there is a consequence to the society. Starts with individuals, but over time it affects all of us. And that's where I think the evidence is very clear that any sponsorship by tobacco companies it represents a far less positive impact than the negative implications of tobacco consumption, which the motivation for that sponsorship is normally geared to promoting. That's the dilemma. I mean, even though there may be some benefits to that sponsorship, whether it is business development or a scholarship to a student, and it may be well-deserved that that business should be given incentives to develop and to grow, or that individual should be given a scholarship to take advantage of their full potential in university or otherwise. What is the other side of that loyalty that you develop? And more often than not, it's an intentional design to support for loyalty and by extension, promoting consumption. What is the impact in dollar terms? What is the impact in human terms? What is the impact in productivity terms from an economic perspective? And there is enough research and evidence to support the fact that it is almost cheese to chalk in terms of the negative consequences over time. And the comparison with taxes and tax collection, I think one has to be careful of, because the taxes applied are intended actually to discourage consumption, even though, and those taxes are the very same taxes that are used to try to treat with the ill effects, and oftentimes have to be bolstered to deal with those ill effects. In other words, they are never enough to treat with tobacco-related illnesses in our society. Again, there's evidence to support that. So I know the tobacco companies speak to the fact that if you restrict them, you pay less taxes. Or if you restrict them, a child may not be able to access a scholarship. But if you don't, you may pay more taxes, but never enough to treat with the problems over time of consumption. And that's the real issue there. The issue of vaping is, you say it's 97% less harmful. It depends on what you vape. I've done a lot of reading on vaping because I've been very concerned about vaping and access to it in the schools. The truth is vaping can be a lot less visible, and it has created, to my mind, a lot of incentives for underage usage and abuse. And the chemicals contained in a vape instrument vary significantly, and the research has shown that depending on what is there, it could be far more harmful. And so maybe one has to look at what exactly is being vaped. I've seen research, I've seen pros and cons. In fact, I've seen where recently in the US, I think, they have allowed one particular organization to support or promote with some criteria for that support. But it probably would be misleading to suggest that somehow vaping across the board is a lot less offensive and a lot less damaging, because that's not what the evidence is suggesting. I think that would be my initial comments. But I think the points you've raised are practical points, are points that do affect people on the ground. In your case, the entertainment sector, the nightclub, the restaurants, and therefore I think the contribution is valuable because I think you voice and represent what many others in your field are thinking about and are saying. And I think we need as part of our public education program to provide a simple and justifiable reason as to why, despite all of this, we have to find a way to demonstrate why some of these measures or these measures in the bill are justifiable. And that's why the communications program accompanying the legislation is so important. The only final thing I'd say is, again, where I started, I think we shortchange ourselves if we place too much value on the tourism support and loyalty we get because of the capacity or the ability to smoke. I think our tourists come here for a lot more and benefit from a lot more in terms of the experience. All right, so I make those comments and then the floor is open now for any questions. Can I see the list of questions, please? If there's anyone. I see Member Gale. Member Gale, yes.
Yes, Chairman, thank you very much. And let me use this opportunity, Chairman, to thank and commend Mr. Russell for appearing before this committee. I've been to Pier 1, it's excellent service, and Mr. Russell, you may want to consider establishing a Pier 2 or Pier 3. But Chairman, it is very good to hear from one of these proprietors in terms of their own view as it relates to the legislation. What he has represented would certainly give this committee the opportunity to review what we are proposing. And it seems that Mr. Russell and his establishment is one that aligns itself readily to regulatory authorities or new regulations. And that is very commendable. I just want to ask him in terms of, you know, when he had established that space to accommodate the smokers, what was the response from your customers or clients in the initial stages? And how did your staff respond to that type of change?
Thank you very much. It was very positive. It was very positive. I think people overall appreciate choice. I think that is what we try to give them. I think that's part of our customer service. That is part of our value-added experience, where you come to Pier 1, you're not just going to get one type of rum, or you're just going to get chicken cooked one way, not a cook shop, of course. And in a group, we have smokers. Time and time again, you know, smokers will be at a table inside the restaurant, and you have to go to them and say, "Excuse me, sir, but you have to go on the back deck if you want to smoke." And it's more frequent than not. Before we had that deck, before we were forced to build that deck, I should say, it was a big problem within the space. It was a big problem where you had to ask somebody to leave the club or to go to somewhere that was not, you know, what they came for. It becomes increasingly difficult when it's a celebrity trip or a celebrity group where maybe the person that's paying for the bill is the one smoking, you know, asking, you know, that whole group, that whole champagne drinking, you know, high rolling group, that they have to leave your establishment. So what that did for us automatically was give them an option, you know, give them the option to say, are you going to be smoking? And if the answer is yes, okay, we'll set you up on the back deck. And 9 times out of 10, they'll go on the back deck and it's aesthetically pleasing. They'll get the same quality of service and they can smoke whatever they want on the back deck without having anybody come and harass them about smoke being a problem. Again, I know we can't build policy that says if you're a Jamaican, you can't go there. If you're a foreigner, you can do this. We know that that's not the Jamaican way. But the elements that we are promoting in Jamaica must be clear. For a very long time, we were one of the best places to come and smoke marijuana. You know, that's a worldwide phenomenon of Jamaica. Bob Marley come and smoke good weed, but yet tourists were being locked up on the streets for consuming ganja. It was a mixed message. I think that's something that we must consider. And again, I am a person that faces this every day. That's where my business, you know, that's the space my business lives in. Tourists coming down here and they have expectations. They're coming to the door with an expectation. Is it right? Is it wrong? Who cares? You know, they're paying their money. They bought a ticket. They booked themselves into a room and they would like to come and enjoy themselves. So the deck itself, to answer your question, was a definite plus. And if we're if we're able to continue to do that in terms of keep that space active, we're fine.
Mr. Russell, any other question? Any other question, comment? All right.
Chairman.
Yes, Senator Longmore, go ahead.
I too would like to add my commendations to Mr. Russell, and thanks for being here and presenting your perspective. It is definitely appreciated, and appreciated not just because you are present, but also the value of your perspective in terms of the impact on your business type. I'm a regular at Pier 1 to myself, love the place. And I also just want to, I'm not going to go repeat myself because we have addressed many of your concerns in past submissions, etc. But I want to recognize that that option of an environment that is open and clear, that other persons are not impacted, is primarily what is at the crux of this bill itself. It is recognizing that individuals have a personal choice to partake in especially the actual first-hand ingestion, but also have a choice to not be exposed to second or third-hand smoke, because that has impact. One of the things that I'm have to be kind of a bit more cautious with your expression was just now when you said that, you know, who cares, because the tourists expect a certain product. At the other end of the scale, in the medical fraternity, lots of those tourists come later on regretting the decision, regretting not having the choice to have steered away from smoking the cigarette. So just recognize that we have to find that balance, and we have to err on the side that protects the individual who is not wanting to partake and may not have that freedom of choice because of the addictive nature of the substance. Okay?
100%.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Longmore. If there are no other questions or comments on the presentation by Mr. Jason Russell, I want to thank him. Again, I think I speak for all that you really represented an important segment of our society and has helped us in terms of articulating the concerns, and they all will be considered. And we appreciate the time and the effort. Thank you very much for that. All right, so we are now members.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We are now in any other business, and we are past the 12 o'clock timeline that we normally set, 2-hour timeline, even though we start a little late. Are there any other matters you want to raise before we look at the dates for next meetings and the lineup? Any other matter? Okay. Well, the intention is, I was hoping that we would have closed all the presentations before the end of the calendar year, which is why I was asking Ms. Brandon how many meetings we could propose between now and that period. Is that period going to be mid-December? I know it's not her call entirely, but I think we could probably look at going up to this end of the second week, the first week in December from where we are now. And based on the numbers that we have left to present, the 3 for next week, and then 2 others that had asked for rescheduling, and then 2 others, we could have 2 additional meetings with 3 presentations in one case and 4 in another, and then try to set 2 more meetings and get that out of the way. And then in the new year, we convene on deliberating the clauses and the suggestions and recommendations and so on. Otherwise, if we think we could put another session in the new year or do 3 sessions this year to complete that. I would love to complete all of this so that we have members as part of their Christmas gift, a nice file of all the presentations. So in your quiet time, you probably reflect on the discussions and the clauses that are of concern to you. So in the new year, we could probably go right into just taking on any concerns, any issues related to the final report.
A file with package and labels, Chairman.
And maybe a piece of Christmas cake, you never know. Yes, a file with all the presentations. So can we try to do two meetings before the end of the calendar year and try to cover all the presentations during that period? Are we agreed on that? Which means 3 next meeting and 4 the following meeting.
Sorry, Chair, I may have missed what date proposed for the next sittings.
Well, I wanted to get a format first and then we propose a date. The date for the next one would be either Wednesday the 10th or Thursday the 11th of November. And then we set one after that.
Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Brandon.
just to say that it's 6 presentations that's outstanding, so we can do
3 and 3.
those presentations over 2 sittings.
Right. Sounds good. That's even better. So 3 and 3. So let's agree on that then. If there are no objections, verbal objections or hands up objections, let's agree on that. Take it that we're all agreed. And which day, the 10th or the 11th, would be good for the next sitting for members? That's Wednesday the 10th at 10 a.m. or Thursday the 11th at 11 a.m. Starting time, that is.
Thursday is better for me, Chairman.
Okay.
Wednesdays are
Chairman,
different.
I believe the Joint Select Committee, another Joint Select Committee meets at 10 on Thursday.
Well, I was depending on Ms. Brandon to guide me on that. Ms. Brandon, these dates were proposed by you. Is there a Joint Select Committee, another committee?
Chairman, I had proposed November the 11th at 2.
Oh, I see.
Because the Joint Select Committee on the Electricity Act will be meeting at 10.
Oh, I see. Okay. So 2. All right. Would that satisfy your concerns, Member Golden? That means you probably would
Yes, yes, Chairman.
move from one to the next. So you'd have a busy day that day.
Every day is a busy day, Chairman.
I can appreciate that for sure. All right. Are we then agreeing that we would go with Thursday the 11th at 2?
It seems okay.
Okay, not hearing any objection. Excellent. So let's do that then. Let's go for the 11th at 2 p.m. on Thursday, November 11th. We do 3 presentations. I'm assuming, Ms. Brandon, it would be the Aston Center for Health and Society. And then the 3 that are listed here. Which 3 were you, for the record, Ms. Brandon? Which 3 are you proposing? Just to be clear.
I was suggesting, Chairman, that we could look at the entities that were scheduled to appear on the 21st of October, but that meeting was postponed. So we could look at them at the next sitting.
All right. Okay. So that's the Jamaica Psychological Society, Association of General Practitioners of Jamaica, Ashton Center for Health and Society.
Yes, Chairman.
Those are the ones, right? Okay.
Yes, Chairman.
All right, so we'll notify them and we will hear those 3 presentations, and then the final 3 on a date we will set for the next meeting, maybe before the end of November, so that we can clear all the sessions.
Chairman, why not establish that date now, since it's in the month of November?
We could. Miss Brandon, which date would you propose in November beyond that? Could we go a week after, Wednesday? You have the parliamentary calendar with you?
Yes, I have it with me, Chairman. The 17th, the 24th, the 24th, and the 23rd is free.
24th is no,
The Tuesday.
No, it's a Wednesday, I think. Yeah.
The 24th is a Wednesday.
No, the 23rd is a Tuesday, and the 24th is a Wednesday.
And then the 17th would be the next one. Can we try and get it out of the way and do it on the 17th?
That would be a Wednesday at 10, Chairman.
Huh? Not good for me. All right, I hear it's not good for me. I'm not sure what's in my diary. What about the 18th?
2 meetings are scheduled for that day, Chairman.
So look, 23rd or the 24th, Chair.
It would be the 23rd or the 24th.
The week of it can't be the 24th. That week is going to be a little challenging for me. Maybe I could do it on the 23rd. You want to do it on the 23rd? Can we do it on the 24th? Maybe difficult for me.
23rd at 10, Chair?
Yeah, 23rd at 10. Are there any disagreements on that, or we're good with that? All right, let's try and do that. I see no objections. All right, so we'll book that then.
So Chairman, for the 23rd, it would be the Jamaica Coalition for Tobacco Control, the Jamaica Chambers of Commerce, and Mr. Wayne Booth.
Right. Who does Mr. Wayne Booth represent? He's just a citizen?
He's an operator of an establishment.
Okay, so maybe we should list his establishment as we did with Pier 1. All right.
It's Booth to Go, Chairman. That's the name of the establishment.
Booth to Go. Okay.
I believe that's the service station in Ocho Rios, is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay, got you. All right. I think we're agreed on that then. So we'll use those 2 dates to just finish up. And then we will provide we'll use the rest of the calendar year to reflect on these issues and then try to bring a final report as quickly after as possible. Okay, so if there is no other business, I ask for someone to move for the adjournment of the meeting until the 11th.
I so move, Chair.
Moved by Member Gale.
Seconded, Chair.
Seconded by Member Golden Campbell. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for the time and the contribution. And the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Keep safe, everyone. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.